lifestyle or the ability, chronic depression doesn't feel good, but it doesn't typically affect lifestyle or the ability to work. Before the fall of man, there was no sin, no shame, no fear, and no depression. Depression is a result of the fall, and those who suffer from depression find that it has ramifications in all parts of human life: external, personal, mental, physical, and spiritual. The other one that I didn't mention is that women go through what they call postpartum depression. And it's temporarily for a time being. It should last no longer than about 2 weeks, 4 weeks the max, and they should be able to get back to themselves. Anything that's longer than that time frame, I'm going to say you might need to go to a doctor and be checked out and see what's going on, because it shouldn't last longer than what it is. So the question is, how should Christians view depression? It's clear then that depression isn't just a problem today, but one people struggle with hundreds of years before Christ. They might have called it anything from melancholy to spirit possession, but it caused great suffering, despair, and in some cases, suicide. It was a real pressing problem, one that started wars and leveled leaders, and one that had no easy solution. Time after time, the Bible presents stories of depressed people crying out to God, begging for help or for him to just take the pain away. And if you suffer from depression, you know what I'm talking about. It's not identified as a sin, but an earthly hardship, perhaps much like oppression or even poverty, which Jesus himself, we will always have with us, Matthew 26:11. And you might say, what do you mean we'll always have us? Because of sin. Sin came into the world. Everything changed. A chemical imbalance. And I always say, if you go to the doctor, if you have a heart problem, you go to the doctor and get checked out. If you have diabetes, you go to the doctor and get medicine. If you have a wound that's open and needs to be taken care of, infection, you go to the doctor. So, why can't you go to the doctor if there's a mental imbalance and you can't control it and you know what's going on and you crying and everything going on, or you want your room all dark, you don't want to be bothered with anyone? Mental health is health. What does the Bible say about treating depression? But as with all the problems people face, there is one thing we are supposed to do with them: bring them to God. Jesus acknowledged the weight of our troubles, whether physical or emotional, promising, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Matthew 11:28-30. Hope does lie in God, as the psalmist writes. But it's important to understand that just because we put our hope and faith in God doesn't mean our problems will go away. Like cancer, diabetes, and other diseases, sometimes we have it the rest of our earthly life. As for whether or not to take medication for depression, the Bible does not address that specifically. But Jesus, in his life and ministry, made it clear that healing and seeking healing is a good thing. He also acknowledged that the sick needs a doctor. Matthew 9:12. Need a physician. You sick? Need a physician. And Paul, when he mentioned Timothy's chronic stomach ailment, didn't indicate he should suffer in his illness, but rather take measure to alleviate. 1 Timothy 5:23. So what I'm saying is, if you're suffering and you're given medicine, take your meds. Take your happy pill. Take whatever you want to call it. Because if you don't, it's going to be worse than what it is. And if you don't, it's going to lead to something else. So you got to do what's best for you and your family. So that's why you want to do it. In closing, depression is a result of the fall, but it's not a sin to feel depressed. Even though depression, we can find hope and joy in Christ. Depression, like other disease or disorders, might be something people can't always cure. You will have it for the rest of your life. Christians can take comfort in knowing they're part of a suffering fellowship, not only today, but also among many other strong and faithful leaders throughout the Bible. And as with all hardships, setting sights on God and drawing strength from Him, in spite of the difficulty, can be a big help. This is part of how the body of Christ bears one another burden. In Galatians 6, it says, bear one another burdens. How do we bear a burden? I'm bearing your burden by telling you what you can do and how you can do it. Talk to your doctor. If you come to me with something, first thing I'm going to say, have you spoken to your doctor? Do you need to see a doctor? I'm going to recommend it because you need it. You need it. We need it. We need to make sure you have it as well. At this time, I'm going to stop, and we're going to look at a video. It's called Mind Fit. Episode 2, please.
It's been over 20 years since I answered my last fire call, but I remember those days as if they were yesterday. I can still smell the smoke on my bunker gear, the personal protective equipment that firemen wear. And to this day, the sight of a fire truck sends a jolt of electricity and excitement coursing through my veins. It was in this building of the Tri-Community Volunteer Fire Department that I first cut my teeth on emergency services. A career that, together with the police department, would occupy the next 15 years of my life. I don't know how many calls I've responded to, but a lot would be an understatement. Some calls are lost in my brain's filing cabinets, while others are so vividly etched that if I close my eyes, I can relive the sights, smells, and moments as if in real time. One of those crystal clear first responder memories happened in this parking lot 20 years ago. Several of my fire department colleagues and I had just sat down to eat a bite at a local restaurant. The waitress had just placed our food on the table when tones sounded, indicating a possible self-inflicted shooting. We ran to the truck, leaving our hot meals as decorations on the table. On arrival, I saw a young man in the driver's side of a car. The door was open, and his limp body was lying partially out of the vehicle. Midway between the car and the front door of an apartment, this young man's mother stood in the grass, crying out at the top of her lungs, "Mi hijo, mi hijo, mi hijo, my son, my son, my son." This fragile little lady was about the height of my mother and looked and sounded like her too. It hit close to home, shattering my heart. To this day, that gruesome scene brings tears to my eyes if I allow myself to dwell on it. The question that has plagued my mind for years that I've never been able to satisfactorily resolve is what brings an individual to such a point of despair that suicide becomes a viable option? According to the World Health Organization, 703,000 people end their lives each year worldwide. In the United States alone, someone dies from suicide every 14 minutes. And at the height of the pandemic, 1/4 of all 18 to 24-year-olds said they'd seriously considered suicide in the last month. The sad reality is that it's the 10th leading cause of death overall, and the second leading cause of death for those 10 to 34 years of age. According to the National Institutes of Health, most suicides are related to psychiatric disease, with depression, substance use disorders, and psychosis being the most relevant risk factors. However, anxiety and trauma-related disorders also contribute. In this episode, we're going to explore 3 of these contributing factors that also happen to be the top 3 mental illnesses affecting all of society today: anxiety, depression, and trauma. While I've experienced traumatic events in my days with emergency services, I have never personally experienced anxiety or depression, which is why I've committed myself to learning more about them. The more I read, the more I realize I don't fully understand the complexities of these disorders and the heavy toll they place on people and society. To that extent, it's time to put the books down and go directly to the experts in the field.
Mental illness is so common in our country that virtually everyone will experience it. My name is David Lewis. I'm the chair of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Pittsburgh and medical director of UPMC Western Psychiatric Hospital. Depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder are each definable as separate entities, but there's also substantial overlap. And I think that reflects both the underlying nature of the illnesses, but also the incredible complexity of human beings. We are just the amazing consequence of our inherited genetics, our life experiences, the nature of the relationships that we've had over life. Currently, depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide. In the United States, about 40% of the years of life that are lost due to disability and premature mortality are attributable to psychiatric or addictive disorders. An important distinction to make is the difference between poor mental health and mental illness.
Anxiety is an emotion characterized by feelings of tension, worried thoughts, and physical changes like increased blood pressure. People with anxiety disorders usually have recurring intrusive thoughts or concerns. They may also have physical symptoms such as sweating, trembling, dizziness, or rapid heartbeat. Anxiety is not the same as fear, but they are often used interchangeably. Anxiety is considered a future-oriented, long-acting response, broadly focused on a diffuse threat, whereas fear is an appropriate, present-oriented, and short-lived response to a clearly identifiable and specific threat.
I first started experiencing symptoms of anxiety when I was about 4. For a long time, I just understood that as I was just a really fearful child. But the more I've learned about anxiety, the more I'm like, oh, I was just a little kid having panic attacks. I actually started having severe panic attacks in high school, but I didn't have a frame that those were panic attacks. And it wasn't until college. At this point, I'm a straight A student. I'm in college. I was a collegiate athlete. Just again, very high functioning. I'm on student leadership. Everything just went off the rails.
Anxiety can be thought of as an understandable temporary response to a single external environmental event. I have to take a test tomorrow. I'm not sure how I'm going to do. I'm feeling anxious. Or it can be a disorder. When it's a disorder, it's the persistent state of worry, concern. They know what the future is going to be, and they know it's going to be bad. It's just dominating.
Like a tunnel vision hypervigilance, something's wrong.